mom, her dad, and her mom were all book nerds with huge libraries. So she passed that on to me, and as you can see, the book nerd in me is continuing on full force. And in a rough state, but it's like the greater culture itself, it's in a state of artful, inspired revival. But even with things being that way, there is a tremendous amount of beautiful, magnificent Ponca culture out there for young Poncas and old Poncas to kind of submerge themselves in. And our culture is medicine. Our culture heals. And so like my dad and my uncles and my aunts, they were not raised around that stuff. So it's kind of like their soul is longing for a medicine that they just don't have. But through the circumstances and the luck and the things described in here, I was introduced to my people's culture. And I got to experience this kind of profound healing that our culture has an innate genius for and an innate facility with. And so this book is kind of about that. It's basically helping Indians and helping other people realize that the story is not what you may have been taught. The story is not what you may think, but it's actually a bigger and more beautiful thing. But isn't that to be said about just about anything that we dig deep enough into? We realize that these surface understandings, they don't tell the full story, obviously. So, yeah, I guess that's a little bit of what I have to share. That's my dream, that this book can help those other young natives and older natives kind of peel off the Clark Kent uniform that they've been living in their whole life and discover that they too are a Superman. This book is kind of like a love letter to a lot of elders, a lot of relatives, a lot of family members, a lot of, I want to say, road dogs and homeboys and old buddies who helped me out when I was very young, and I was kind of searching and lost, and I didn't know anything about being Ponca. I didn't know anything about being an Indian person. I kind of I learned from a lot of good relatives, and this book is kind of my love letter to them. And I kind of think that this book is a magical thing, and when you open up its pages, it kind of emanates these holograms of all of these super radical people that hopefully connect us to all the people in our life that we feel most lucky to have known, who have left the deepest, most inspiring and beautiful mark on our souls and lives. I kind of feel like this book is full of my people who were that to me, and I hope it touches the readers in that place where these people touched me, because that's the place where we got the juice to connect with who we really are and who we really want to be in this world, and to be a shaper of time, a shaper of history, a shaper of our community, a shaper of our family, and a shaper of our collective combined future that we are all contributing to, that we are all influencing, and that we are all writing together in one way, shape, form, or style. Now exists as something outside of my laptop and as something beyond a dusty manuscript on my own home bookshelf, and that all sorts of people can read it, especially all sorts of people who don't know me and who are kind of outside of my sphere. And it's a really important book to me, and what lives inside of it is really important to me. and it's a little memoir, and I'm going to read some from it here in a little bit. But the origin of the book is that I wanted to write something for our native youth, that they could kind of feel about the way I felt about a lot of books that I really kind of passionately connected with in my youth and in different crucial parts and passages of my life. And with the mom who was the librarian and coming from the family of book nerds, I really discovered how books can be your friends when you feel like you don't have any friends, or books can be your teachers when you feel like you don't have the teachers you want in your life, or books can be your portals to other places and other experiences when you feel like you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, like I was. And so books can give you a lot of comfort, companionship, inspiration, and illumination, strength, courage, bravery. And my hope / prayer is that this book functions as a channel to provide a number of those things to a lot of our native youth. But because the story in it is also, I think, a very human story and a very modern story, I hope that the book functions to provide those things for all the people who find themselves thumbing through its pages or reading it. And a little bit of my story is, I think that this is kind of looking out at you all here, I was kind of reflecting and thinking, this is a pretty unique experience for, to me, for a Native person to be asked to speak openly about their people, their people's reality, their people's culture and practices and belief and way of being in the world. And as I was kind of sitting here reflecting, I was thinking of my dad, and I was thinking of my grandpa, and I don't have a lot of stories of my grandpa's grandpa. I do have some stories of my grandma's great-grandpa, who was a well-known native, a man named Chief Standing Bear. And I was kind of thinking of my dad and my grandpa and how many generations of natives had to be silent, and they were not welcome in a kind of everyday way to do what I've been invited to do now, and that is kind of just to speak freely and to share. And I just was kind of thinking, this book is about that, the long journey that Native people have been on to find a way to be themselves in this kind of complex, multi-dimensional, multicultural kind of American hybrid culture we're all living in now. And so this book, that was my journey, was figuring out how to be myself in a culture that felt like there was no space for me, in a culture where the majority of my people were incredibly invisible and suffering a lot because of that invisibility. When you kind of live in a world where no one sees you, you kind of experience a certain kind of treatment that doesn't do a lot for your well-being, or do a lot for maybe that kind of dreaming part of your heart that wants to have the best life possible for yourself and for your family and for your children. And I experienced, my dad to a large degree, was basically a car wreck version of that experience. And growing up, I experienced that a lot of myself. You have to kind of hide yourself to survive. And that's a lot of what I learned from my dad. In my dad's time and in my grandpa's time, it was dangerous to be Indian. You would be singled out, or lots of unwanted things would happen. And so he passed that on to me. And growing up, I experienced a lot of violence and abuse and self-hate and depression. And then the stuff that this book describes happened to me. And my life was changed. And I went from being a guy who had spent his entire life being afraid to talk to a guy who decided that he wanted to use his love of words to help his people and to help them in the way that I was helped by the people who are described in this book. And maybe I will read my excerpt now. The excerpt that I chose kind of has the DNA of my life in it. It has all the components that made up my life. Let's see. This excerpt comes from when I think I just turned 21 and I'm 40. So it's the kind of the midway point of, it's like kind of like the midway point. In my early 20s, I was introduced to the sweats and to the spirituality of my people. It was like love at first sight. I'd never sweat before, and then I was sweating once or twice a week for 2 years straight. Going to the sweat, I met all sorts of people. Growing up, I don't think I ever heard an Indian relative of mine talk to me about anything spiritual, really. But once I started sweating, I was treated to an almost unimaginable superabundance of Indians talking about spiritual things. There were elders, medicine men, sun dancers, pipe carriers, heokas, dreamers, psychically gifted people, prayerful people, and spiritual people of all kinds. I listened as a shy young man, as life stories, dreams, visions, incidents of healing, and powerful memories of every sort were generously shared. It was like being washed by the sacred spirit waters of the ancestors. New rooms grew inside of me to accommodate what was being passed around, to accommodate new aspects of my spiritual life that were waking up within me. I met Leonard Crowdog. Spirits began coming to me in dreams. It was transforming. It was unbelievable. Within the first couple months of my going to the sweat all the time, I met an interesting, outspoken, very intelligent and salty old Lakota woman. I bumped into her at the university and we got to chatting. She said she was finally finishing up her degree. The next time I bumped into her a few weeks later, she said, "I had a vision of you." I sat down. "Oh yeah?" I think this was the first time anyone ever had a vision of me, that I'm aware of at least. Let me get a drink. "I was sitting at my kitchen table," she said, "looking out my back window, and then there you were, standing there by my garden, looking in at me." This is a very accurate memoir, by the way. Wow. I think I'm supposed to do a divination. That was my response. Wow. I didn't know what to say, really. We were in the food court, and she was eating food, and she just started telling me this. And so I was not accustomed to this kind of conversation. "I think I'm supposed to do a divination for you." "A what?" We sat there, and she began to tell me her life story. She was in her 50s, the daughter of a well-known local medicine man whom she was estranged from. She'd had experiences and had seen things since she was a little girl. explored all sorts of spiritual paths over the years, was writing and researching a book, and had recently returned from Africa after completing a 3-year training with a Dagara medicine man named Malidoma Somé. She said she worked with these spirits called the Little People and did a form of divination that Dagara people referred to as stick divining. She had a hearty presence, a rich vocabulary. When she asked me if I'd be interested, I very open-mindedly told her, sure. We arranged a time and day for the divination. She wrote me down her address, and then she told me, you need to bring them a question and also a coin. I thought about what she'd said, and then I said, okay. I didn't realize I had so many one-word answers until right now. That was me back then. We had the divination the following week in her dusty, cluttered garage. The night before, I had a dream where she and I were walking the aisles of a liquor store. We found a particular brand of vodka. She grabbed a small bottle of it and said, bring this as an offering for the little people too. When I woke up, I went down to the liquor store and bought the vodka from my dream. When I showed up with it and told her about the dream, she laughed and thought it was pretty funny. The little people enjoy a little alcohol every now and then. Over in Africa, we drank a beer that the little people had taught the Dagara how to make. It wasn't that good. It was kind of weak. This woman prayed aloud in front of an altar she had set up on an old chest of drawers, shaking her rattles, calling on her ancestors, on the plants and animals and waters, on mountains and thunderclouds, on these little people friends of hers. After that part of the divination, we sat down with this homemade symbol-laden mat between us. She had a stick that would have made a good play gun when you were a kid. She sat bent over, listening, her eyes closed, something else moving her hand around. I respectfully watched and listened. I could feel a lighter version of the vibrations that accompanied the presence of the spirits in the ceremonies the medicine men did. She told me a number of things, each of which branch out into their own story that will not be shared here for various practical reasons. But the main thing that she said was this: you have little people. They walk with you, and they want you to call them. The divination lasted about 20 minutes. When it was over, we went inside to her kitchen table and talked about it. So what does that mean, that I have little people and I'm supposed to call them? It means exactly that. They want you to call them. I was very nervous. As far as I was concerned or knew, only medicine men